Welcome to Reaching New Heights with Troy Bell, the city manager, City of Muskegon Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. Every Wednesday, 2 p.m. on 1037 The Beat. So, again, thank you very much to the comments and messages since our last show. From what I understand and the feedback, folks really appreciated some of the information that was shared. And so thank you for continuing to send me that feedback, even if you don't manage to make the show or you catch it after the show is recorded. But I do appreciate that feedback. So today I would like to welcome our county prosecutor, DJ Hilson, to the show. Excited to have you join us on the show. Welcome, Mr. Hilson.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to not only be a part of 103.7 The Beat, but be on somebody else's show. So, I'm going to sit back in the passenger seat and enjoy the conversation.
All right. Well, before we get started with DJ, I want to catch us up on our housekeeping as usual. So I want to remind everybody that February 21st at 5:30 p.m. will be the presentation to the Downtown Development Association for the visioning plan. And many of you participated in the visioning plan process. The focus groups, that we had three different focus groups that included businesses, it included residents, and it included various organizations. And so we're excited with the work that the Smith Group did. And thanks again to the Community Foundation for the grant that made that happen. And also Michigan Economic Development for their additional funding to make sure that this happened. And just as a reminder, this is the plan that's similar to, if you're familiar with what City of Muskegon did 10 or so years back, called Imagine Muskegon. This is a similar process that we went through with this, and the objective was to create a vision for what people in our community wanted to see our community look like in the next 5 to 10 years. And so I'm excited to see the results of that. I've had a peek preview to it, and I think everybody will be excited to see it just like I am. Good information, and it's we can dream about things, but putting those images and thoughts onto a piece of paper so that you can share it with other people, that makes all the difference in the world, because people can't see your thoughts until you put it on paper. And this is what the Smith Group is excellent at doing, by shepherding the conversation around what can happen, what's possible, and even sometimes the impossible, because we want to make sure that we shoot for the stars so that we have the greatest opportunity to make it to the moon. So again, that's February 21st, 5:30 p.m. at the City Hall Council Chambers. And a reminder, coming up next week on Monday, February 14th, is our first council meeting of the month. Our council meetings are the second and fourth Monday of the month. So just beware, when there's 5 Mondays in the month, we're not having a meeting for 3 weeks instead of every 2 weeks. This past January 31st, was the 5th Monday of the month. So kind of threw everybody out of whack. But just remember, the second Monday and the fourth Monday of every month is when we have council at 5:30 p.m. in council chambers. So this month, it'll be February 14th and February 28th. So please join us in the city council chambers. If you can't make it in person, please go ahead and Zoom in, and you can find that information on our website. So I mentioned that this visioning plan is being presented to our Downtown Development Association. So if you'd like to find out more about the DDA and what they're doing, please visit our website, and there's a plethora of information there about the DDA. So the DDA shepherds the development and management of our downtown areas. And so the more you learn about that, the more you'll have information and insight into what's coming up, because we have a boatload of things that we're planning for this upcoming year in terms of events. We've talked about it on previous shows. So We'll keep you posted on upcoming events. And I want to thank Jennifer Ross as well as Kaya Hunter for agreeing to head up my committee on events and activities for Muskegon Heights. So with that, just a gentle reminder, spring is coming. We're really emphasizing again the cleanup of our community. And so this year, we're going to kick it off right, start early, and make sure that we do everything that we can in order to address the issues of blight in our community. As a matter of fact, we're kicking off a campaign as of April 1st, which is Beautify the Heights, Fight the Blight. And so you'll see more coming out about that, including billboards, postcards, yard signs, and the like. So excited for that campaign to kick off. And it takes a community. We've all heard this before, but this is really where it starts. You, me, everyone pulling together, taking responsibility for the way our community looks. So that's not only being personally responsible for what you do with your trash and your litter, but also taking the initiative, if you see it on the ground, to pick it up and put it in a trash can. So make sure that we're mindful of this, because we really want to make sure this year we start off right. And just as a reminder, when you put your trash in the bin, make sure you bag your trash before it goes in the bin, because we've had numerous incidents where the Republic Trash Company comes and picks up your bin, and when they go to load it into the truck, the stuff that's not in the bag flies all over the place. And it's really difficult for them to stop when they've got 3,000 some odd homes to hit, to pick up every little paper that flies out. So please bag your trash before you put it in the bin. So I'll stop there and segue on to Black History Facts. We started off last week with the Did You Know? And so this week, the Black History Facts that I'd like to share with you. First of all, did you know... Let me bring that up, about Nancy Gooch. Nancy Gooch, Gooch, was born in 1811, and she is noted as one of the first successful African-American females in the United States. Let me read here. Nancy Gooch was born as an enslaved person in Maryland in 1811. Although it varies based on the census year, her gravestone says 1811. Later on, she was moved to Missouri after working in the fields for a few years in Missouri. Gooch, alongside of her husband, Peter, was moved to California by their master, William Gooch. However, left behind was Gooch's 3-year-old son. Her 3-year-old son's name is Andrew, and that's important to remember, because this is a connection to what we talked about last week with the grandfather clause. So her 3-year-old son, Andrew, was left behind and was later purchased by a family in Missouri. Once the Gooches got to California and gained their freedom, Nancy began to do laundry and other domestic chores for the miners in California. She also lived in a small shack that barely cost her anything, which allowed her to amass the money to be able to purchase her son's freedom. By the time she collected enough funds to purchase her son's freedom, slavery was abolished, but she was able to have enough money to pay for her son's family to be moved to California in 1868. Unfortunately, her husband Peter died in 1861, but Ms. Gooch continued to conduct her business and amass a fortune. She was able to purchase, let me make sure I get this right. She was able to purchase 80 acres with the funds that she was able to amass, and that eventually grew to 320 acres, including the land that was part of the gold discovery site called Sutter's Mill. She was close friends or acquaintances, depending on who you talk to James Marshall. Marshall is credited with reporting the finding of gold in California in 1848. So Ms. Gooch was responsible for 320 acres. She owned it, and part of her acres were where gold was found. And so as such, she was able to amass a fortune as the first African-American female to ascend to that level. Now, coming back to the remark that relates to the grandfather clause. California took some of the Monroe's land holdings from Andrew Monroe, which was her son. Andrew Monroe's son had amassed a portion of those 320 acres, and California took part of Andrew Monroe's son's land. And if you think about who is Andrew Monroe's son's grandfather, his son's grandfather was Peter. And since Peter had been a slave, under the grandfather clause, they exercised that as the right to take away land because his grandfather that he owned, because his grandfather had been a slave, under the rights associated with the illegal law called the grandfather clause. So that land is now the foundation of the Marshall Gold Discovery State Historic Park, and the entire Monroe Gooch family is buried in the park's Pioneer Cemetery. So that is one did you know fact. And then I want to add one more to that. If you bear with me here just a second. And so I want to share with you the story of Jan Ernst Matz Elliger. He was born in 1852, died in 1889 at a young age. He was an inventor. Matzinger was born in Dutch Guyana, which is now Suriname. He relocated to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He worked as a mechanic on the Dutch East Industries merchant ship, where he acquired his skill sets in being able to use his hands. When he arrived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, he became acquainted with the shoemaking industry. He eventually moved to Massachusetts to pursue his interest in the shoe industry. And he has 5 patents to his name for developing the shoemaking machine. So his shoemaking machine allowed the shoe industry at that time to increase its productivity by 900%. And so it enabled the industry to produce between 150 and 700 pairs of shoes a day. So a little known fact about Jan Ernst Matzellinger. I'll never get that name right. But he was not given credit for his invention. He was overlooked for many, many years. And it's only recently that he's been accredited to it. Let's see, one other thing. Now, in the industry, when he first came up with this invention, people didn't believe it was capable of doing what he claimed it was, but he was able to prove its functionality in the factories. But because of the color of his skin, he was not mentioned in the history books until recently. In fact, contemporaries referred to him as the Dutch N-word and his machine as the niggerhead laster, a term used in the apparel industry for many, many years as in reference to the type of fabric that is used in the shoemaking process. So again, a little known fact in Black history. So that is, I think, a good segue when we talk about land and the grandfather clause to what I want to start off with our guest, Mr. Hilson here. And I'm going to add the map here so that you can see it. In front of you is the map of Muskegon many, many years ago. And in the red, you will see on that map what is referred to as the red-lined areas. And for those of you who are familiar with Muskegon Heights, looking at that map, you can see that 90, maybe 80% of that map is redlined, which means at that time that this map was put together, that if you wanted to get financing, you could not get financing to purchase land or property in this area. And if you joined in for last week's show, you probably heard me say that that Muskegon was one of the communities in Michigan that experienced the most extreme versions of redlining. And so that hurt us in two ways. That meant that if you wanted to amass land, like Ms. Gooch did, if you wanted to amass land, you had to do it with cash. You couldn't do it with financing. And it also discouraged people who may have wanted to purchase land in that red zone from purchasing in that red zone, and redirected them to the areas that were yellow or blue as areas that they would like to purchase in because they had more value. And hence, this was a de facto enunciation of where Black folks could live versus where white folks live. And so that's a legacy of our community that we're dealing with today. And I bring this up to you today because I want to talk with our illustrious prosecutor about the value and importance of what I've been talking about for many, many shows here, the value and importance of building new houses in Muskegon Heights. And so I'd like to bring you in, Mr. Prosecutor, to talk about, from your perspective and the work that you do in keeping us safe every day, how is that affected? And many people might not realize the value and importance to the work that you do about building new homes and filling in gaps on vacant lots. So why don't you start us off with your thoughts about that?
Well, thank you, Troy. And again, thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to, even though we're spending it virtually, to spend time with you. So I appreciate the opportunity. And, it's a great question. One that I don't know that I've ever been asked before. So you are breaking new ground here. And I appreciate that because, I think we all appreciate and understand the difference between what an area of blight can do as it relates to public safety and what an area that maybe has, I won't say necessarily new, but well taken care of houses, and that the blight houses then turn into new housing. I think it brings a level of ownership, if you will, to the community where now, if it were me, for example, I would feel obligated to make sure that I maintain that new property to the best of my ability. I mean, wear and tear is going to happen, but there certainly are, and we've all seen them, regardless of whether it's in Muskegon, High City, Muskegon, or anywhere else in this community. We've all seen it where houses can be neglected, and what happens. That certainly invites what I know you probably have experienced, and I've seen in my career, squatters, people who don't necessarily own the property but are certainly holding up in those areas. It certainly invites other criminal activity like drug use.
Right.
We've experienced more violent behavior in these types of homes. So when a home isn't truly owned and a property isn't truly taken care of, it is I guess it's part of a recipe that could bring some criminal behavior to that particular area. And you can imagine that the more of those homes or properties that amass in a particular block or a particular neighborhood, it's far more likely that you're going to see criminal activity. So I know that there are a lot of efforts to make sure that we're cleaning up the blight, which I know Muskegon Heights has always been really a champion of, but more importantly, new development, and new housing, right, because that makes your community more attractive. Let's be honest. I mean, people, when they're looking for a place to live, they want to make sure they're looking for a neighborhood that looks like a neighborhood and doesn't look like it's falling apart.
That goes back to the broken window syndrome as well, right?
Right. And that's just human nature.
Right.
And certainly when businesses are looking at a community where they're going to invest maybe some capital in, they want to be able to see those neighborhoods too, because ultimately their employees may be either buying those houses or living in those neighborhoods. So, I mean, I think there's certainly more of a return on investment when communities make the decision to invest in blight removal and or housing development. And, you can look at some of the areas in the city of Muskegon where there's been some recent development, new housing, and
Mm-hmm.
what that is and what that means to those areas. So yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of and certainly support any city's effort and leadership effort to take on those two things, the blight issue as well as new development, because
Sure.
I think there's only positive that comes from it, quite frankly.
Right.
Whatever negative there is, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head outside of maybe cost, but whatever
Mm-hmm.
negative there is far outweighed by the return on investment that something like that can produce.
And I've talked on the show about how we have about 3,700 homes in Muskegon Heights, and unfortunately, over the last 4 years, we've torn down anywhere between 400 and 500 homes. And this community was actually built with the infrastructure to be supported by 5,000 residences. And so we're about 1,300 houses short of what we need to be able to have a sustainable community. And that's like 1,300 missing teeth in our smile. And if we're going to be able to bring our community back, we have to fill in those 1,000+ vacant lots with new homes, to be able to support and sustain our community. And so I've talked repeatedly about the importance of us building new homes. And you mentioned, that you couldn't think of anything that might be negative, and there is the potential of the negative of displacing people who are currently in the community. And most people associate that with gentrification. And I've tried to dispel that on this show, because gentrification doesn't necessarily mean displacement. And I've used the term renaissance. The renaissance is embracing gentrification without the displacement piece. Renaissance is this, as we've coined it, the opportunity to improve the quality of life in our community with housing, healthcare, recreation, places of worship, all of these areas. If we can move the needle and improve those areas, then we are embracing a renaissance. But the way that we've approached building these new houses is very intentional around the idea that we want to make sure that the generations after generation of people who have grown up in Muskegon Heights, who live in Muskegon Heights, have an opportunity to participate in this new housing boom that we're about to undertake. And that's why we've required every developer to bring down payment assistance. The target is 20% down payment assistance for every house that we build and sell, as well as credit repair, because we know we have a number of renters in our community that would love to transition to home ownership. They're paying anywhere between $800 to $1,200, $1,500 a month for rent, and we could move them into a new home and ownership for between $600 and $1,100 a month in terms of mortgage and taxes. So credit repair is the gateway to being able to access those low down payments to be able to get into the size house that many of our residents would love to have, and transition from a renter community. And not to say that renters are bad, but you pointed out very well that owning a home is not to paraphrase what you said, skin in the game, right?
Yep.
You're gonna be vested in taking care of your property because it is part of your investment, and everybody who understands money wants a return on their investment. And so that is a driving force. If we can transition renters into homeowners, that can change the accumulation of wealth, the development of wealth in our community. And the single most effective way to transition wealth from one generation to the next is home ownership. So we can change the trajectory of our community by that simple process of being intentional and building and giving people who live in this community an opportunity to participate in the blessings associated with that. So I appreciate your support on that. I know in conversations before, I had mentioned the gentleman, the builder that was interested in purchasing 29 lots and wanted to build, to start with 29 because he wanted to build up to 100 lots. And Unfortunately, we weren't able to garner the support that we needed to get that passed. But I haven't given up yet. He's still willing to come in, and still his proposal is on the table for the 29 lots. And the interesting thing I haven't mentioned is we're not talking about just buying, lots for face value. What we're asking builders to do is pay 3 years worth of taxes up front to be escrowed, so that we know that in that 3 year period of time that they have to build on those lots, that we're not losing taxes. That's to address the issue that we've had in the past where people have bought a lot with good intentions, never paid any taxes on it, never developed them, and then it went back to the land bank after 3 years of lost taxes. And so we've got developers that are willing to put their skin in the game up front, pay those taxes up front, and he's one of them. So your support for the idea of building new houses and how that can affect remedying some of the crime issues and blight issues is truly appreciated.
Well, you're welcome. And I just wanted to reemphasize your point on displacing. I totally agree that, this can't be a hidden move to displace anybody, because I think every citizen who has the ability deserves the opportunity to be a homeowner. And I love the idea that, we want to help those who maybe have never experienced it before, maybe are in some tough times with the credit aspect, because that's what banks look to, and some of those other kind of forgiveness programs, because ultimately I guarantee you there's a ton of people in the Muskegon Heights area that want to call something their own and want to nurture it and cherish it and understand, as you said, understand what a valuable asset that is, because there are very few things in this world that are appreciating assets.
Yes.
And it's not the Escalade that you're driving. It's it's that piece of property. And you
just to be clear, I don't have an Escalade.
No, I know. I'm sorry.
The Royal
that was I get around the beat, and I get teased all the time by Big Rob and Paul about the helicopters and the boats and the gated community that I don't have. So I get lost in the moment, Troy. I apologize.
That's all right.
Yeah, but look. I mean, you talk to anybody who has sold their house in the last 2 years, and how that has appreciated since when they bought it. So, when you do it when the market's right, you get more than the return on your investment. So
absolutely,
this seems like, to me, a win-win situation.
And your point is a very valuable point, because and the reason why homeownership is that pathway to generating wealth is because God is not, as my parents used to tell me, God is not making any new land. If anything, it's being taken away by rising waters. And so anything that is scarce, like gold, as we talked about with Ms. Gooch, has increasing value. And so land will ultimately increase in value because it's one of those things that you can't make any more of, and it's finite. And so it is one of those assets, few assets, that appreciates in value just by ownership. Whereas things like cars and stereos, electronics, as soon as you buy it, it depreciates, it loses its value. When you drive your car off the lot, you lose anywhere between $500 and $2,000 as soon as you drive it off in value, as soon as you drive it off the lot. So you mentioned one other thing that brought me back is wanting a return on your investment when you're a homeowner. So many of the programs that have been put together in the past have included financial literacy training type things in order to be able to be qualified for, eligible for down payment assistance, etc. We're asking our developers to do one more nuance on that, and instead of just doing literacy and training classes before you buy the house, we're asking them to commit to 1 year to 3 years of mentorship after the house is purchased, just to go back and check in with you to make sure that you rolled up your hose and winterized your house before the winter comes, that you remembered to change the filter on your HVAC or your furnace. Little things that you might learn about in the class, but when you're in the middle of life and stuff is happening, you might forget about those little things that can change the value of your investment. And so they have agreed to in addition to the other things that I mentioned, to provide mentorship for first-time home buyers and new home buyers. So that is all part of getting the maximum return on your investment, things that you invest in. So if I can, I'd like to segue then to talking about some other innovations, and forgive me for considering what we just talked about as an innovative approach, and I think it is. We're taking best practices that have been learned about in other communities, and we are trying to make those best practices, implement them, but also add on innovative ways of implementing it that is customized for our community. And so along that same note, I'd like to talk with you about your thoughts about the Reserve Officer Program that I kicked off when I came here to Muskegon Heights. Realizing that in order for us to be able to attract talent from our community, we have to be able to get them, those folks that want a career and have a passion for law enforcement. We have to be able to get them certified as police officers. In other words, send them through the academy. And to do so costs us anywhere from $15,000 to $17,000 per candidate, with no guarantee that that candidate will succeed before they can come back with their certification. It makes more economic sense for small communities like ours to hire officers from other communities that are what we call lateraling, coming over to our community with their certification already in hand. And unfortunately, because of the history of law enforcement and the tendencies that are part of the legacy of slavery and discrimination and structural systemic racism in this country, we have very few officers from our community, or individuals from our community, that get recruited and hired to go to the academy in other communities. So if we're going to reverse that trend or break that cycle, we have to figure out a way to be able to send people from our community to the police academy. And so we came up with this concept of the Reserve Officer Program. I don't consider myself a genius because it's not something that I thought of. It was the way that I became a police officer in Miami. I went in through the Reserve Officer Program there. They sent me to the academy, but I committed to provide 25 hours of volunteer service for $1 a year to my department every month, 25 hours a month, in return for them taking the risk and the gamble to spend the $17,000 to send me, well, back then it was more like $12,000. I'm old. To send me to the academy and get me certified. And I came back and I started my 25 hours a month. And before I knew it, there was a full-time position that was open. And I transitioned from being a reserve officer with the commitment of those 25 hours into being a full-time officer. And so that from what I understand, has only been done in Muskegon, this program, this concept, and maybe 2 or 3 other communities throughout the state of Michigan. So we're a sense of trendsetter and looking at that way of skinning the cat, so to speak, as providing a solution to bring in. And so far, I think we've hired, and don't quote me on this because the chief's not on the show, but I think we had 3 that went through our reserve program that are now full-time officers. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without the reserve program in place. So your thoughts about, the whole concept and understanding that's why it's difficult for many departments to diversify. It's difficult for small departments that might be majority minority to be able to bring on officers from that community.
Yeah, I mean, I really think in this day and age, and I'm sure you're well aware of the trend that law enforcement is facing, not only here but across the nation, of
Right.
dwindling numbers of folks even considering careers in law enforcement.
Yes.
And certainly because of that, there has to be a lot of outside the box thinking and innovation. Just to get people interested in what I think is a very rewarding career. It can be a very rewarding career in law enforcement.
Right.
And so to do something like the Reserve Officer Program, which it is nice because it does give that, it does allow that person to enter the academy and do so understanding that their school debt, if you will, is taken care of, and
Hmm.
they're committing to the hours of service that's attached to that. And what's
Hmm.
nice about that is that you then get to be part of the that police department's culture. You get to know
Hmm.
the community, and it's far less likely that
Hmm.
you're then going to pick up and go, that was great. I enjoyed my time here, but now I'm going to go somewhere else that I don't even know anything about.
Right.
I think it creates, those roots, if you will, to that department. And so,
Right.
quite frankly, that it is it's a great idea, because it does, again, it allows you to do some recruiting to,
Mhm.
again, have that department look like the community that it serves.
Right.
And then ultimately, like I said, there's a benefit to the individual, and there's a
Hmm.
benefit to the department, and there's a benefit to the community that helps create those roots. And I would guess that the percentage of those staying is higher than the percentage of those doing that and then leaving.
Right. And I think a great testimony is Chief Maurice Sane, who was the last officer that the city of Muskegon Heights sent to the academy. And 23, 22 years later, he's now chief of police. So his passion for the community, having grown up here, having gone to high school here, having started a family and raised his kids here, has resulted in his long-term commitment to Muskegon Heights, and all the diversity, equity, and inclusion training that I do for police departments or have done in the past. One of the things that I emphasize is, that it's not just about when your effort in trying to embrace diversity around browning your police force. That's not the key. The key is around bringing people into your police force who are from the community that they're serving. And that's, what, regardless of what you look like, that is an appreciation for, and those people who, like we talked about with housing, have skin in the game. They are vested in the success of the community, and that's the critical factor. And of course, if you're in a majority minority community, if you begin to hire people from the community, statistically, that's going to look like the community that you serve. So,
Yeah, I mean,
it's,
I'm
go
sorry, I
ahead.
didn't interrupt, but ultimately, it's as we were having this conversation, I'm thinking about all the various meetings and forums I've been to, where people talk about wanting to make a change, wanting to make a difference.
Hmm.
What better way to make a difference than to be part of the movement, if you will, for change, by
Hmm.
working for a local police department. Uh,
Right.
you can then, and I love, the whole skin in the game thing, because if you grew up in the community, you love that community and you want that community to thrive, and you want and there's no better way than the ultimate protection of being in law enforcement.
Right.
And so, for those folks that are looking to, want to make a change or want to improve the community that they're living in,
Hmm.
now's the time,
Right.
because I mean, people are, I know, chiefs and whatnot, they're begging for people to do this,
Hmm.
because the need is so great, and this is a perfect time and perfect opportunity to really, kind of let your actions show, the change that you want to be.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned again about the value to the community, because one of the big surprises for me when I went into law enforcement, and I'll be transparent saying I went into police work because I thought it was a great way to be able to pay for school while I was in college, because it was a full-time job that I could work at night and I could go to school during the day. I did not realize that in becoming a police officer that it could satisfy the passion that I had for community. And I think what I realized, and I went to the academy with 44 men and women who are great people. But what I realized from this experience is that oftentimes we miss the opportunity to share with the broader community that if you have a passion to be a teacher, there's a role for you in police work. because so much of the police work that I did involved teaching. It involved working with kids. It involved engaging, with neighborhood associations and sharing with them the knowledge and information about what can help them be safe and secure. So you have these other passions that are community focused. Law enforcement is an opportunity for you to meet those goals and objectives. And I don't think we talk about that enough, that for nurses, for school teachers, for sociologists, that law enforcement, I mean, with that passion for community, I can teach you how to be a police officer. It's difficult if you don't have that internal passion for me to teach you as a police officer to have that passion. And so I think there's room and opportunity as chiefs are looking for people to come in to broaden the net that we cast, to be able to show people who have passions for these other traditional disciplines that law enforcement is a wonderful way in changing our perspective on the way that we do policing for you to fulfill that passion. So,
I agree with you 100%.
And so that brings up the one of the other topics is the police reading program. And so I said I was surprised to find out as an officer that there were these other opportunities. And so the department that I work with was thinking out of the box, and they required us to spend an hour a week in an elementary school or middle school just reading with the kids in the school. And so that, from my perspective, allowed me to develop relationships with the kids, allowed me to then extend those relationships to the families, to the teachers, to the entire school. So that, I think, develops a level of trust on a authentic and genuine level that you can't if you just spend all of your time in a police car separated from the community that you serve.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about community policing. I think there's a lot to be said about this idea that, as a figure who is seen by the public on a daily basis. It depends on certainly what shift you work, but but ultimately, people know what their law enforcement folks look like. They know they know a lot about them, from appearance.
Right.
And so, they are in some respects, well, they're public servants for sure, but they're like, they're like you and I, folks that are certainly very, very public, are recognized in public. And it is an opportunity to somewhat, I'll say this in quotes, take advantage of that, because just like I hear this all the time, when I spend some time with some folks, they're like, holy cats, you're actually kind of fun to be around. You're a real person. Yeah. I am a normal guy. I don't, whatever you perceive, this position or me to be, I am a normal human being. I'm a father, I'm a husband. I like to have fun. And the more we can break those misperceptions, especially of our law enforcement officials, and certainly starting at that age, the elementary, middle school age, it's far better we're off. And I know a lot of people kind of bristle at this idea of community policing, but you're policing the community anyways. So you might as well embrace the area or the district, whatever it is that you're policing, and get involved in the activities. Because if it were me, like I am today, I want people to understand I'm just a normal guy. I'm a normal guy. I like sports. I like to go to the beach. All that. I want people to know that, so that when we do meet, whatever the circumstances are, that it's not this. This scary presence, because that is not who I am. And I think law enforcement needs to do that. And again, the reading program is easy. An hour of your time reading to kids, man, it's very rewarding, and it's an easy thing to do.
Right. And I know there's sometimes this tension between beat policing versus car policing. And in the effort over the last 20 years to more professionalize law enforcement, we've gone to shifting the police vehicle as a mechanism for getting you from the headquarters to the beat to being your primary mechanism for policing. We've outfitted them with computers, terminals, and cameras, and everything that you need to ride around in the community, almost a mini headquarters out on the street. And even though that has a value in terms of efficiency on some levels, what we were realizing, at least before I left the force, was it creates that separation between you and the people that you're trying to protect. And it's very difficult for you to discern the difference between the people that you're trying to protect and the people that are making them feel insecure or unsafe when you have only the ability to see them through the glass in the car that you're driving. And so I think, there's a balance there that we have to achieve. And whereas I would be concerned for beat officers being on a street on a regular basis, I see programs like this where you get engaged in community in a facility like a school district as the balance that you can strike in order to be able to generate those or create those relationships. So I appreciate your support for that concept. And, to your point also, I've enjoyed over the last 2 years the opportunity to get to know you on a personal level and find out that you are fun, and that veneer that some people paint you with is not accurate. That although I would say I don't want to see you out on the beach in a bathing suit.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't put you up to that. But, I try to stay in shape, but my age is catching up to me just a little bit.
You and I both. So, but I've said it often that Muskegon is a warm and welcoming place, and they've Muskegon Heights and Muskegon in general have welcomed me with open arms, and as you have, and I certainly appreciate that and the opportunity to get to know you. A couple other things that I want to touch on in the last 10 minutes that we have is another out-of-the-box type of thinking that we're doing in Muskegon Heights around the concept of addressing the potential crime based on its linkage to alcohol. Now, I was taught when I was an officer that 80% of all crime at that time was linked to or associated with alcohol in some way, shape, or form. And so I don't know if that still holds, and what statistics you see and how that plays out from your experience, or specifically here in Michigan, that may be different.
No, I mean, I think it's probably pretty close to that 80% mark. I mean, that alcohol certainly still plays a role in some of the things we see, but also now you got the illegal controlled substances that are probably just as much, if not more, contributing to that. The people that are addicted to these substances, are usually the ones that are stealing stuff from our stores, unfortunately committing more serious crimes of armed robbery. We see a lot of our homicides related to, the drug trafficking trade. And so, yeah, I mean, the root, if you take, what we deal with on a yearly basis, you go down to the root cause of it. The majority of those cases are going to be alcohol and or drug driven, which is unfortunate because, you would think that would be two evil roots, if you will, that we could do something about it. And I know there are a lot of efforts in the community to address those that are battling those demons, and it's a constant battle. But ultimately, the more that the community can help support treatment for those that are facing those things, then we're getting it on all fronts. The criminal justice system, even though it's got wonderful avenues for treatment in our treatment courts and whatnot, that isn't the answer. That shouldn't be the ultimate answer as to how people get help. It does take the family, the relatives, those other folks to really support that person and understand they're going to need a lot of help. And ultimately, if we can attack it from all fronts, then we're really we're really digging out the root of where our issues lie.
Sure. And I know when I was leaving policing, that was on the tail end of Miami Vice and cocaine. And
Yep.
yeah, goes.
Listen, I didn't think you were that old, but yeah, you're old.
Yeah, I've been around a few blocks a few times. And we realized what we realized though is even with the cocaine situation, that a lot of the crime that was associated with that was still linked to drug use and drinking, and that those two together exasperated the situation. And so we attack the issue from the perspective of, if we can deal with alcohol, we can address it. And unfortunately, at that time when crack started to take over communities, we didn't look at it as an addiction that needed to be treated. And so I appreciate that your perspective that we do have to be compassionate about understanding that these are addictions that don't necessarily mean that your character is unworthy, that it's an addiction that affects your character. And if we can deal with the addiction, then that addresses some of the other aspects of it. But what I appreciated from my experience was when we approached the issue, we had a mandate to have extra duty officers on site at any facility that served alcohol between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. And whether that was a bar or a liquor store, those were those extra duty, off duty assignments that we were assigned to, and the establishments were responsible for taking care of that. And so what we found with extra duty officers on these sites, that it reduced the propensity for violence, that people were much more respectable in bars and in nightclubs, at liquor stores, at least on the facility, and that being present in those locations also gave us access to information and knowledge that helped us address a lot of other ancillary issues that were related to the consumption of or purchase of alcohol. So I'm hopeful that as we begin to roll that out as part of the ordinance that was passed last year here in Muskegon Heights, requiring that extra duty officers be posted at these locations, that we'll be able to see some of the similar results in mitigating the issues of crime in our community.
Yeah, again, it's again thinking outside the box. I mean, I think we're all really good at traditional policing, traditional prosecution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's been ingrained in all of us for a long time, and it's now for me over my last couple of terms as the elected, really starting to think about, okay, what can I do proactively
Mm-hmm.
to, one, stop generational criminal justice kind of stuff, and what can we do to make somebody's first touch with the criminal justice system their last.
Right.
And so to coincide with what you're talking about, it's doing those things, because ultimately you're right, it makes sense. The more boots on the ground, the more present, would hopefully be the deterrent, that you won't have as many issues. And I certainly I agree that does then feed itself to maybe other information being gathered. Whatever. I mean, people will often chat if they feel they're in a kind of a zone of comfort. So I mean, it is. Yeah, I mean, look, traditional. There's still a place for traditional means, but I think the doors of non-traditional or more proactive approaches are really open wide, and we're starting to see the benefit of doing things like that. Again, for me, it's about making sure that I don't see the same person 5 times.
Right.
That isn't healthy for them, and it certainly isn't positive for the community. And
Absolutely.
what can we do in order to stop it the first time, or stop it from ever happening? Is kind of the direction and the way that I like to kind of see things.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, and we've just got a couple minutes left, and wanted to get your comments about the Ring doorbell program that we've introduced here in Muskegon Heights. And I think, on one of the first or second days that being here, that I met you, I threw that idea out to you, um, and I will say your response helped motivate me to continue down the path of getting that implemented. So. We've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 170 of them installed in the community, with the goal of getting at least half of the community outfitted with it. About 1,800 is our goal. And we've gotten wonderful feedback from the community. It's been free. We've been able to do it because of grant funding to make it free for senior citizens. And for those folks that don't qualify for senior citizen, we've been able to reduce the cost after installation of down to just about $60. So I don't know if you've gotten any feedback on the program, but on the Ring doorbell and our initiative to roll out, and we have a $153,000 grant to roll out crime cameras throughout the community to help people be accountable, and also to help people feel more safe and secure in their own homes.
Well, listen, I'm ready to sign a letter of support whenever you need it. I think this is such a great program, and I can think of many investigations where we've been able to utilize the footage from some of these Ring doorbells or Ring security cameras that have been extremely beneficial. And again, it's not Big Brother watching. I like what you said. It's accountability. It's understanding that neighbors and neighborhoods, they're tired of having people shoot guns on their street or deal drugs off their street corners. They're tired of it,
right?
And it's the dynamic of being tired of it, but feeling safe in reporting it and
right.
being the responsible citizen. And these Ring doorbell cameras, perfect, because it allows for citizen participation, but in a very non-contact way. And so, whenever you need to re-up or you need refunding, you need a letter of support, make sure you knock on my door, because I'm happy to do it.
I will do that, definitely. I will hold you to it. I appreciate.
No, you don't need to hold me to it, man. I'll print the letter right now if you want it, and you just have it.
All right. Well, we'll do that, because it's coming time for us to go out for more funding on that. So if there's any additional funding that's floating around in your office, please point me in that.
I can't believe you said additional funding in my office in the same sentence. You do realize who holds my purse strings, right? The makeup of the board that. Okay.
Yes, I do. Right. I do.
Okay.
Yep. So I was talking to them as well. All right. Well, we're just about out of time here. It's been wonderful having you as a guest on the show. I look forward to having you come back.
Absolutely.
I appreciate what you do for the community and the character that you bring to our community, and the work that you do. So I look forward to continuing this conversation forward.
Absolutely. Listen, Troy, I can't say enough of the energy and the innovation you're bringing to the city of Muskegon Heights. I appreciate that as someone who, pays attention to how all the cities and townships are doing, and you're bringing a breath of fresh air. So anything that I can do to help support what you've got going on to make that community a better place to live, work, and play, I am 110% behind it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the vote of confidence. I appreciate it. And with that, I will say thank you to our listeners for tuning in again on Reaching New Heights, where you get to know what you need to know so you'll be in the know. 103.7 The Beat. Be blessed.
As an Olympic athlete, I prepare for everything. So when I became pregnant, I thought I was ready. But at 32 weeks, I was diagnosed with severe preeclampsia and had an emergency